When humans finally showed up, the galaxy fell silent. The great council chamber stretched across 3 miles of polished crystal floor. Representatives from thousands of worlds sat in floating pods that drifted slowly through the vast space. Some breathed methane, others lived in pure energy fields, and a few existed only as mathematical equations given form. But today they all shared the same tired discussion that had gone on for over 400 years. "The third planet species is dead," announced Commander Vexillar, his 6 arms waving dismissively. His people had been watching the galaxy for 10,000 years, and he had never seen a species survive their own violence. Their radio signals stopped decades ago. No more of their crude broadcasts, no more signs of life. Archivist Zektar floated in his energy bubble near the back of the chamber. His ancient race had evolved beyond physical form millions of years ago, but he still felt something like sadness when he heard these words. "We should not be so quick to judge," he said, his voice echoing through the mental link all council members shared. The humans were different from other young species. "Different how?" laughed General Thexra from her warpod. The Dominion fleet had conquered half the galaxy, and she knew danger when she saw it. They fought wars with metal bullets. They poisoned their own air. They argued about which invisible sky being to worship. They were primitives just like all the others. The chamber filled with agreement sounds from dozens of species. Clicking, humming, mathematical proofs expressed as music, all saying the same thing. Humanity was gone, and good riddance. But Zektar remembered things the others had forgotten. He had been watching Earth longer than anyone. He remembered the first human who looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone was looking back. He remembered their first radio signals, full of hope and fear and curiosity. Most importantly, he remembered how quickly they had changed. "In our records," Zektar said, "most species take 50,000 years to go from discovering fire to leaving their planet. The Ketherani took 80,000. Even the Great Builders needed 30,000 years, so Commander Vexler's species had needed 40,000 years themselves. The humans did it in 10,000. And most of that jump happened in their last 200 years. The chamber grew quiet. This was true, and it was strange. Most species grew slowly, steadily, learning each lesson before moving to the next. Humans had crawled through history, then suddenly exploded into space-age technology. Maybe they were lucky, suggested the Hive Queen of Sector 7. Her billion children thought as one, and they had seen many species rise and fall. Maybe they found old ruins. Ancient technology. Zektar pulled up the records for all to see. Images filled the air above the council chamber. Humans in their crude flying machines barely a century after discovering how to make them. Humans splitting atoms only decades after learning atoms existed. Humans sending signals across their planet before they had even left their homeworld. "Look at their progression," Zektar said. Each discovery built on the last one, but faster and faster. They did not find ruins. They were not lucky. They were accelerating. "Accelerating toward their own destruction," General Thexra said firmly. "The last signals we received showed them building weapons that could destroy their whole planet. They probably used them." This was also true. The final human broadcast had been full of fear about something called nuclear war. Then silence. "We should remove them from the watch list," Commander Vexlar said. "Earth is dead. We waste resources monitoring empty space." Most of the council agreed. Earth had been interesting for a while, like watching a small animal learn to use tools. But the show was over. Time to focus on species that might actually join galactic civilization. But Zektar could not let go so easily. "I request permission to maintain one monitoring station. Just one. As an archive project." The council leaders looked at each other. Zektar was old and harmless. His people lived for millions of years and spent most of that time collecting information about dead civilizations. If he wanted to waste his time watching an empty planet, why not let him? "Granted," said the Council Prime. "One station. Low priority. Do not request resources for this project." "I understand," Zektar said. The Council moved on to other business. Trade routes through the spiral arms. Territorial disputes between the shell builders and the crystal singers. A new species in the outer rim that might be ready for contact in another 1,000 years. But Zektar's mind stayed on Earth. Something bothered him about the way human signals had stopped. Most dying civilizations sent out desperate messages at the end. Calls for help. Warnings to other worlds. Last words before the darkness. Humans had simply gone quiet. Not slowly, like a civilization falling apart, all at once like someone had turned off a switch. Their planet was still there, still green and blue and beautiful, still turning around its yellow star, but no signals came from its surface. Zektar set up his monitoring station in a distant part of space, far from the busy trade routes. Just a small cluster of sensors and computers, barely larger than a human city. He programmed it to watch Earth and wait. Years passed, decades. Other species joined the galaxy. Some failed and disappeared. The great powers shifted and changed. But Earth stayed silent. Sometimes Zektar visited his little station. He would float among the sensors and look at the data streams. Earth's weather patterns were normal. Its magnetic field was steady. The moon still circled overhead. By every measure, it was a healthy planet. Except no one was talking. Maybe they moved underground, Zektar thought. Maybe they built cities beneath the surface. But his sensors could detect underground activity. They could see heat patterns, electromagnetic fields, chemical changes. Earth showed none of these signs. Maybe they left their planet, he wondered. Maybe they found faster-than-light travel and went to the stars. But faster-than-light travel left traces. Ripples in spacetime. Energy signatures. Zektar's instruments were very good at detecting these things. They saw nothing. More years passed. A century. 2 centuries. The galaxy began to forget that humans had ever existed. Earth became just another entry in Zektar's vast archives, a curious species that had burned bright and died young. But still Zektar watched and waited. He began to notice something odd about Earth's radio silence. It was too complete. Even dead planets usually had some background radiation, some electromagnetic noise from natural sources. Earth had none of that. It was not just quiet. It was perfectly silent, as if something was actively absorbing all electromagnetic energy. That was impossible. Nothing in known physics could create such perfect silence. But the sensors did not lie. Zektar expanded his monitoring network. He built new sensors with different types of detection equipment, gravitational wave detectors, dark matter scanners, quantum field analyzers, all of them aimed at the small blue planet that had once been home to a promising young species. The results made no sense. According to his instruments, Earth existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. It was there and not there at the same time. Solid matter and pure energy simultaneously. The planet seemed to be existing in multiple dimensions at once. Impossible, Zektar whispered to himself. Equipment malfunction. Sensor errors. He rebuilt everything. New computers, new detectors, new analysis programs. The results were the same. Earth was becoming something unprecedented, something beyond his understanding. For the first time in a million years, Archivist Zektar felt truly afraid. The alarm systems across Council space screamed warnings that had never been programmed to sound. Every sensor network from the core worlds to the outer rim detected the same impossible event. Ships were appearing in normal space without using any known method of travel. Admiral Thexra stood in the command center of the Dominion fleet's greatest warship, staring at displays that made no sense. Her tactical officers ran data checks again and again, but the results stayed the same. Admiral, we have 47 vessels appearing simultaneously across 6 star systems, reported Commander Zaxxon, his 4 eyes wide with confusion. No hyperspace signatures, no wormhole distortions, no quantum tunnel residue. They just appeared. Ships do not just appear, Admiral Thexra said firmly. She had commanded fleets for 300 years. Space was predictable. Physics had rules. Show me the sensor recordings. The main display lit up with footage from a dozen different monitoring stations. Empty space, then suddenly ships. Not the gradual emergence of vessels leaving hyperspace, or the explosive portal opening of wormhole travel. One moment there was nothing. The next moment, ships existed where they had not existed before. What about stealth technology? Admiral Thexra asked. Advanced cloaking devices? No, Admiral, said Science Officer Nethys, her tentacles dancing over analysis controls. Our sensors would detect the power requirements for cloaking systems this advanced. Besides, look at this. The display zoomed in on one of the mysterious ships. It was smooth and silver, about a mile long with curves that seemed to flow like water, but there was something wrong with how it looked. The ship seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Parts of it appeared to fold into spaces that should not exist. The computers cannot properly map its structure, Nethys continued. The ship appears to have surfaces that are both inside and outside itself simultaneously. Our visual processors are struggling to interpret the data. Admiral Thexra felt a chill run through her hardened combat instincts. In all her battles across the galaxy, she had never encountered technology that broke basic geometry. "Origin point analysis?" she demanded. "That is the strangest part," Commander Zaxxon said. "Trajectory calculations suggest all 47 ships originated from the same location. The Sol System." The command deck fell silent. Sol System meant Earth. Earth meant the dead human species that the Council had written off decades ago. "That is impossible," Admiral Thexra said. "Humans are extinct. We monitored their planet. No signals for over 60 years." "Admiral," interrupted Communications Officer Velta, her voice shaking. "We are receiving a transmission request from the lead vessel." Admiral Thexra straightened her uniform. First contact protocols were clear, even when the contact made no sense. "Open a channel." "I cannot, Admiral. Our communication systems are not compatible with their transmission method." "Explain." Velta's hands trembled over her controls. "They are not sending radio signals or subspace messages. According to our analysis, they are somehow transmitting directly through dimensional barriers. The signal exists in spaces our equipment cannot access." Admiral Thexra looked at the impossible ship on her screen. It hung in space like a silver dream, beautiful and terrifying. Around it, space itself seemed to bend slightly, as if reality was making room for something too large to fit in 3 dimensions. "Keep trying to establish contact," she ordered. "Send this data to Fleet Command and the Council, full priority, and bring us to battle readiness." "Admiral," Science Officer Nethes said quietly, "I do not think our weapons will be effective against those ships." "Why not?" "Because I am not entirely sure they are made of normal matter. The fleet's most powerful sensors focused on the human vessels. The data that came back challenged everything the Dominion had learned about physics in 10,000 years of space travel. The ships registered as having negative mass in some areas, positive mass in others. Their hulls appeared to be constructed from materials that existed in quantum superposition, solid and liquid and energy all at the same time. Most disturbing, the vessels seemed to be powered by controlled manipulation of dark matter itself. "Dark matter cannot be controlled," Admiral Thexra said. "It barely interacts with normal matter at all." "Apparently humans disagree," Nethes replied. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on every major world. The ethereal collective's energy beings found their perfect mathematical understanding of reality suddenly flawed. The Hive Queens discovered that their billion-mind consciousness could not comprehend what they were seeing. Even the ancient builders who had shaped stars and moved planets stared at the human ships with growing alarm. In the council chambers, emergency sessions convened as reports flooded in from every corner of galactic space. The impossible ships had appeared everywhere at once, near military bases, trade stations, colony worlds, and administrative centers. Not attacking, not communicating, just present. "How many ships total?" demanded the Council Prime. "Current count is 47,812, reported the military liaison. "All identical, all apparently crude, all completely beyond our understanding." Commander Vexlar's 6 arms waved frantically as he studied the tactical displays. "Their positions are not random. Look at the pattern." The holographic map of the galaxy lit up with red dots showing human ship locations. At first it looked like chaos, but slowly a design became clear. The ships formed a perfect geometric pattern that encompassed the entire known galaxy. Each vessel was positioned with mathematical precision to create what looked like a 3-dimensional mandala of impossible complexity. "It is a message," whispered Archivist Zektar from his energy field. "They are telling us they understand the shape of the galaxy better than we do. Message or threat?" asked General Thexra through the communication link. Before anyone could answer, every screen in the chamber went white. Not static, not system failure. Pure clean white light that somehow carried meaning without words. And then a voice spoke. Not through the communication systems. Not through the air. The voice existed directly in the consciousness of every being in the chamber, regardless of their species or sensory equipment. "Hello," the voice said, gentle and patient. "We are home." The white light faded, leaving the council members staring at each other in shock. The voice had not been translated by their universal communication devices. It had appeared in their minds already in their own languages, their own thought patterns. That is impossible, someone whispered. But the evidence floated before them in 47,812 silver ships that bent space around themselves and spoke without speaking. Earth was no longer silent, and the galaxy suddenly felt very small. The silence stretched across the council chambers for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Every representative sat frozen in their hovering pods trying to process what had just happened. A voice had spoken directly into their minds, bypassing every natural law about consciousness and communication that the galaxy's greatest scientists had established over millions of years. Council Prime was the first to find words. Did everyone hear that? Nods and agreement sounds came from around the massive chamber. The Hive Queen's billion children had all heard it simultaneously. The mathematical beings had received it as pure equation. The energy creatures had felt it as controlled frequency. Somehow the message had been perfectly translated for every type of consciousness present. Who wants to respond? Asked the Council Prime. Admiral Thexra activated her communication pod. This is Admiral Thexra of the Galactic Council Defense Fleet. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. She broadcast on every frequency, using every known communication method. Radio waves, subspace signals, quantum entanglement networks, even primitive light patterns. No response came through conventional channels. Instead, the gentle voice returned, appearing once again directly in everyone's awareness. We are the humans of Earth. We understand this is confusing. May we explain? This time, along with the voice, came something else. Images, but not visual ones. Pure understanding that painted pictures in the mind without using eyes. Every council member suddenly knew things they had not known moments before. They saw Earth as it was now, still blue and green, still beautiful but changed in ways that made no sense. Cities existed that were also forests, oceans that were simultaneously water and starlight, mountains that reached up into dimensions the watchers could feel but not see. They saw humans, but humans unlike any species the galaxy had catalogued. Some looked like the primitive creatures from old broadcasts, bipedal, organic, with simple tools. Others appeared to be made of living light. Still others seemed to exist as complex mathematical relationships given form. All were unmistakably human. All were unmistakably the same species, despite looking completely different. We went quiet not because we died, the voice continued, but because we were changing. What you call silence was us learning to speak in new ways. Archivist Zektar floated forward in his energy bubble. His ancient mind was racing with possibilities that seemed impossible. How long? He asked. How long have you been different? The answer came not as words, but as knowledge flowing directly into his consciousness. Images of human history, but not the version the galaxy had been watching. This history showed humans discovering something fundamental about reality, around the time their radio signals had stopped. Something about consciousness itself. They had learned that awareness was not produced by brain activity, but the other way around. Consciousness was the basic force of the universe, and physical matter was just one way consciousness expressed itself. Once humans understood this, they began to reshape reality through focused thought. The first breakthrough had been small, a few humans learning to influence probability by sheer will, and groups working together to alter local physics. Within a generation, the entire species had transcended the need for technology as other species understood it. You stopped using machines, said Science Officer Nethes from her analysis station, understanding flooding through her mind. You became the machines. Not machines, came the gentle correction. We became conscious directors of reality. What you see as our ships are focused manifestations of collective human will. What you detect as impossible physics is simply us asking the universe to work differently. Commander Vexillar's 6 arms trembled as he processed this information. You can change the laws of physics? Physics has no laws, only habits. Most species accept these habits and build technology to work within them. We learn to help the universe develop new habits. The implications hit the council members like physical blows. Every advancement their civilizations had made, every technological marvel they had built, every conquest of nature and space, all of it was primitive compared to humans who could rewrite reality with focused intention. But you were so young, protested the Hive Queen. You barely left your planet. You fought wars with metal weapons. Images flowed again, showing the true human story. Yes, they had been primitive. Yes, they had been violent and divided. But they had also been something no other species had been, desperate enough to try impossible things. Faced with environmental destruction and nuclear weapons, humanity had reached a crisis point. Other species at such moments either destroyed themselves or fell back to safer technologies. Humans had chosen a third option. They had decided to transcend their limitations entirely. We nearly destroyed ourselves, the human voice admitted, and now they could tell it belonged to a specific individual. But in our darkest moment, we discovered something wonderful. Consciousness is not trapped inside matter. Matter is trapped inside consciousness. Once we understood this, everything changed. Show us, demanded Admiral Thexera. Her military mind needed proof, needed to understand what kind of power she was facing. Are you certain? Asked the human voice, and for the first time it carried a note of concern. Once you see what we have become, your galaxy will never be the same. The Council Prime looked around the chamber. Representatives from thousands of worlds, dozens of species, millions of years of combined civilization development, all of them staring at readings that showed impossible ships doing impossible things. Show us, he said. The demonstration began gently. One of the human ships hanging in space near a council observation post simply changed. It shifted from silver metal to what looked like crystallized music. The crystal sang, and the song could be heard across the vacuum of space without any medium to carry it. Then the ship became a flower, a massive spacefaring flower that bloomed in slow motion, its petals reaching across thousands of miles. Each petal contained entire ecosystems, complete with weather patterns and what looked like miniature civilizations. The flower became a geometric shape that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Council sensors could detect the extra dimensions but could not map them. The shape rotated through angles that had no names, creating patterns of beauty that made watchers weep without knowing why. Finally, the ship became something that looked exactly like what it had been before, a simple silver vessel hanging in space. But now everyone watching knew it was not really made of metal. It was made of human will, human creativity, human consciousness shaped into a form that could travel between stars. We do not conquer physics, explained the human voice, which they now knew belonged to Dr. Sarah Chen, speaking for her entire transformed species. We collaborate with it. We ask reality politely to work in new ways, and because our asking comes from love rather than force, reality agrees. The silence that followed was different from before. This was not the silence of confusion or fear. This was the silence of an entire galaxy, realizing that everything they thought they knew about existence was wrong. And in that silence, 47,812 human ships waited patiently for the galaxy to decide what to do with the knowledge that consciousness was king, and the humans had learned to speak its language. The Emergency War Council meeting took place aboard the Hegemony's flagship, a massive battle station that housed enough firepower to destroy star systems. Representatives from the galaxy's major military powers gathered around a holographic display, showing the positions of human ships throughout known space. Supreme Commander Kethvar of the Hegemony of Suns slammed his armored fist on the planning table. This is unacceptable. No species appears in our territory without permission. No one demonstrates impossible technology without explanation. These humans are either lying about their abilities, or they represent the greatest threat the galaxy has ever faced. Admiral Thexera shifted uncomfortably in her command chair. She had seen the impossible ship transformations firsthand, but military protocol demanded skepticism. Their demonstrations could be elaborate illusions. Advanced holographic technology combined with sensor manipulation. Exactly, agreed War Prime Zexthul, his cybernetic implants glowing with tactical calculations. No species transcends physics. They want us to believe they are God, so we will surrender without fighting. The assembled military leaders nodded agreement. They had spent their careers understanding threats in terms of weapons, shields, and firepower. The human claims of consciousness-based reality manipulation fell outside their ability to process. I recommend immediate action, declared Supreme Commander Kethvar. Full fleet mobilization. We surround their vessels and demand they submit to standard galactic law. If they refuse, we demonstrate that the Hegemony of Suns has kept the peace for 10,000 years through strength, not pretty light shows. Within hours, the greatest military fleet in galactic history began moving toward human positions. 3,000 Hegemony warships, supported by Dominion battle groups and mercenary fleets from a dozen other powers. enough concentrated firepower to crack planets and boil away the atmospheres of worlds. The fleet took position around a single human vessel that hung peacefully in empty space near the neutral zone. The silver ship, barely a mile long, found itself surrounded by weapons platforms that dwarfed it completely. Supreme Commander Kethavar opened communications on all frequencies. Unknown human vessel. You are surrounded by the combined military might of the hegemony of suns and allied forces. Submit to inspection and registration procedures, or face the consequences of defying galactic law. The response came not through communication channels, but as understanding placed gently in the minds of every being in the fleet. The voice belonged to Dr. Sarah Chen, the human who had spoken for her species before the council. "We understand your concern," she said, her mental voice carrying infinite patience. "You need to know if we are a threat. We are not. But we recognize that our word alone cannot ease your fears. What kind of demonstration would help you understand our intentions?" Supreme Commander Kethavar was not accustomed to being asked what he wanted during a military confrontation. Proof that your technology is real. Proof that you submit to galactic authority. Proof that you cannot simply ignore our weapons. "Very well," came the gentle reply. "We will provide all three." What happened next would be debated by military historians for thousands of years, though none would ever fully understand it. The human ship did not move. It did not fire weapons or raise shields. Instead, it simply expressed a different relationship with reality. The 3,000 warships of the hegemony fleet found themselves existing somewhere else. Not destroyed, not captured, not transported. They were simply in a different place that was somehow also the same place. From the perspective of the fleet crews, they were still in their battle positions, still surrounding the human vessel. Their instruments read normally. Their weapon systems showed ready status. Everything appeared exactly as it had been. But they were also somewhere else entirely. Each ship existed in its own perfect pocket of space-time, customized for the needs and desires of its crew. The bridge officers of the flagship found themselves commanding their vessel through the most beautiful region of space they had ever seen, with nebulae that sang in harmony and stars that danced in complex patterns just for their enjoyment. The engine room crew discovered that their workplace had become a paradise of perfectly organized systems that maintained themselves, leaving the engineers free to explore and create and learn. The weapons officers found themselves in a reality where their guns fired not destruction but pure beauty, energy beams that painted, aurora across the void, and missiles that bloomed into flower, gardens the size of moons. Every member of every crew lived their ideal version of military service. They were still soldiers, still protecting the galaxy, but in a reality where war was art and conquest was collaboration, and enemies became friends through understanding rather than force. To the human ship, the entire hegemony fleet had simply vanished. 3,000 warships winked out of existence as casually as turning off lights. The remaining military observers, watching from distant positions, saw their most powerful fleet disappear without explosion, without debris, without any trace that it had ever existed. The space where the ships had been was empty, peaceful, and somehow more real than it had been before. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice reached out to the remaining forces with the same gentle patience. "Your friends are safe and happy. They are experiencing the most fulfilling military service possible, in a reality where they can protect and serve without causing harm. They think only minutes have passed, but they are living perfect lives. Would you like to join them?" The question sent shockwaves through the remaining military commanders. Their greatest fleet had not been destroyed or captured. It had been improved, given better lives, relocated to a dimension where they could be everything they had always wanted to be as soldiers, without the pain and destruction that usually came with military service. "This is impossible," transmitted Admiral Kexnar from her position 30 light-years away. "You cannot simply move entire fleets to other dimensions." "We asked the universe to provide your people with what they truly wanted," came the reply. The universe agreed. "Your crews wanted to serve and protect. How they can do so in a reality where such service brings only joy? Bring them back," demanded War Prime Zexthal. "They do not want to come back." "Would you like to see?" Without waiting for permission, Dr. Chen shared the experiences of the relocated fleet crews. Every watching military officer suddenly felt what it was like to serve in a reality where weapons created instead of destroyed, where military action brought peace instead of war, where strength was used to build rather than tear down. The vision lasted only seconds, but it was enough. The remaining military forces found themselves faced with a terrible choice: attack beings who could relocate them to paradise, or accept that their understanding of power was fundamentally flawed. "We could bring them back to your reality," Dr. Chen offered, "but we would need to erase their memories of the perfect reality they have experienced. They would return damaged by the loss of something wonderful they could no longer remember. Is that what you want for your people?" The military commanders looked at each other across subspace communication links. Their greatest weapons were useless against beings who could rewrite the rules of existence. Their most powerful fleet had been defeated by being given everything it had ever wanted. For the first time in galactic history, the combined military might have known space surrendered not because they had been beaten, but because they had been offered something better than victory. And in dimensions adjacent to normal space, 3,000 crews continued their perfect military service, protecting imaginary worlds and fighting glorious battles where everyone won and no one ever died. 6 months after the hegemony fleet's peaceful relocation, the galaxy was struggling to understand its new reality. Trade routes meant nothing when humans could transmute asteroids into any needed material with focused thought. Military alliances crumbled when conventional weapons were as outdated as stone clubs. Currency became worthless when scarcity itself was just another habit the universe could be asked to reconsider. The Great Council chambers had been rebuilt to accommodate representatives from the human collective. Where once stood podiums and floating platforms, now existed spaces that shifted between dimensions to house consciousness in whatever form it chose to take. Dr. Sarah Chen appeared sometimes as the bipedal human the galaxy remembered from old broadcasts, sometimes as living mathematics and sometimes as pure awareness that spoke without form. "We understand the disruption our presence has caused," she said during the first official integration session. Her voice carried the patience of a species that had learned to experience time as a flexible suggestion, rather than an unchangeable law. "We did not return to conquer or control. We came home to share what we have learned." Council Prime floated in his traditional crystalline pod, but even his ancient authority seemed small in the presence of beings who could reshape reality with gentle intentions. "The galaxy has functioned for millions of years on principles of physics, economics, and power that you have made obsolete overnight. Our civilizations do not know how to adapt to a universe where thought is more powerful than technology." "Then we will teach," Dr. Chen replied simply, "not as masters instructing servants, but as children sharing a new game with their friends." This was how humanity had chosen to frame their transcendence, not as evolution beyond their origins, but as growth that included everything they had been. They still laughed, still cried, still felt wonder at the beauty of stars. They had not abandoned their humanity. They had discovered that humanity was far more than any species had imagined possible. The first Ascension Academy opened on a neutral world in the buffer zone between major powers. The planet itself had been transformed by human consciousness into something that existed simultaneously as a lush garden world and a center of learning that spanned 17 dimensions. Ambassador Kexthar of the Silicon Confederacy was among the first non-human students. His species had evolved from sentient crystal formations and prided themselves on logical, mathematical thinking. He arrived expecting to learn new technologies or gain access to advanced weapons. Instead, he found himself in a simple classroom where human teachers helped him discover something he had never known. His crystalline consciousness was already capable of reshaping reality. His species had been unconsciously manipulating quantum fields for millions of years, but they had dismissed these effects as minor anomalies in their mathematical models. "Your people create beautiful harmonic patterns in local space-time whenever you sing," explained Teacher Martinez, a human who appeared as a gentle fusion of organic and geometric forms. "You have been accidentally composing symphonies in the fabric of reality without realizing it." Ambassador Kexithar learned to consciously direct these natural abilities. Within weeks, he could encourage matter to reorganize itself into more stable configurations. Within months, he was helping his classmates by creating pockets of adjusted physics, where their own species' latent abilities could develop more easily. The revelation spread. Every species had some natural capacity for consciousness-based reality manipulation. Humans had not gained impossible powers. They had simply been desperate enough to discover abilities that all sapient life possessed but rarely recognized. The Hive Queens learned that their billion-mind collective consciousness could coordinate probability across vast distances, essentially making luck and chance flow according to their intentions. The ethereal collective discovered their energy-based existence allowed them to communicate directly with the quantum vacuum, convincing empty space to spontaneously generate needed particles. Even the mechanical AIs that served various civilizations found they could influence the behavior of electrons in computer systems through focused processing patterns, effectively turning their own computation into a form of digital magic. As more species attended the academies, the galaxy began to change in ways no one had anticipated. Wars did not end because they were forbidden, but because combatants discovered they could create separate realities where both sides could achieve their goals without conflict. The ancient territorial dispute between the Shell Builders and Crystal Singers resolved when they learned to exist in parallel dimensions of the same space, each group having access to the resources they needed. Scarcity became a choice rather than a limitation. Species that wanted the challenge of working within limited resources could maintain traditional economic systems. Others learned to manifest abundance through collective will and focused intention. Both approaches were equally valid, equally supported by the new understanding of consciousness as the fundamental creative force. But perhaps the most profound change was in how species related to each other. When any civilization could reshape reality according to their needs, competition became unnecessary. The energy once spent on military buildup and territorial expansion could be directed toward art, exploration, and the simple joy of conscious existence. 5 years after first contact, archivist Zektar visited Earth for the first time. He traveled not in a spaceship, but by asking reality to relocate his consciousness from his monitoring station to the human homeworld. The journey took no time at all and all of eternity, depending on how he chose to experience it. Earth was beautiful beyond description and impossible to fully comprehend. Cities grew like living organisms, their buildings breathing and singing in harmony with their inhabitants. Oceans existed as liquid water, crystallized music, and pure possibility all at once. Mountains reached up into dimensional spaces where humans had built gardens of living starlight. But what amazed Zektar most was how fundamentally human everything remained. Children played in parks that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. Families gathered for meals that nourished both body and soul. Artists created works that could be experienced as paintings, songs, mathematical theorems, or direct transfers of emotional understanding. Humanity had not abandoned its nature in transcending physical limitations. They had discovered what their nature truly was when freed from the habits that physics had accidentally convinced them were laws. We were never trying to become gods, Dr. Sarah Chen explained as they stood together in a garden where flowers grew from pure mathematics and bloomed into small universes. We were trying to become fully human. It turned out that being fully human meant being fully conscious, and being fully conscious meant being able to collaborate with reality instead of being trapped by it. The galaxy had fallen silent when humans first appeared, overwhelmed by the implications of what they represented. But the silence was ending now, replaced by something far more profound. The sound of an entire galaxy learning to sing reality into new and beautiful forms. And in the spaces between dimensions, consciousness itself smiled at the music its children were finally learning to play.